Hello, my name is Roman Khidekel. I'm a grandson. I will be speaking about modern interpretation, one can say implementation of Russian avant-garde suprematism as presented by Lazar Khidekel for the modern city, for the more modern urban development, so on and so forth. And I'll be describing ideas developed by my father, architect Marc Khidekel, for the various urban structures to be built at the Coney Island and also on 96th Street in Manhattan. So, I mean, we have received a lot of background information from the scholars. They have described in great detail all the notions of Russian suprematism and avant-garde, and I'll be really brief. So, almost a century ago, Lazar Khidekel wrote his manifesto, the YIVO manifesto, the central issue of which was a relationship of growth of the cities, of urban environments, and the preservation of natural environment, because obviously there is a, what I suppose environmentalists and the evolutionists would call kind of like a constructive friction between natural environment and human environment. And the prevailing view in 20th century was, of course, that the nature has to be conquered. Nature has to be made subordinate to the needs of the modern civilization. Lazar Khidekel also saw that this subordination, this almost, one can say, almost like a virtual enslavement of nature, through urban expansions, through rapid industrialization, it's also having a dehumanizing effect on the people themselves. And I mean, of course, he was proven right. I mean, at the end of his life in the 70s and 80s, I mean, the bleak Soviet apartment blocks, and I mean, even in the United States, you know, the projects, all this sort of the failures of modernism, where people were placed in these huge megalithic concrete structures without any natural environment, any green space. Obviously, it created for the very bleak surroundings. And so he already saw in early 20s, I mean, possible implications of this technological and industrial expansion. And he felt that suprematism and avant-garde could offer an alternative. And the notion was that there has to be an almost equal partner relationship between nature and humanity, some form of equanimity, a natural balance akin to a golden ratio between the civilization and the natural environment. So here we see some of our modern interpretation for the Coney Island. This is a city that is elevated above the landscape in the form of the bridge. That was developed by, I can show you a few slides also. There is various interpretations. But going back to the concept of YIVO city, Lazar's specific interpretation of suprematism, that we have heard about previously from the speakers, of the geometric economism that could quantify space, that could quantify sort of a visual and urban structures, their proportional relationship to each other. Those notions he applied to the Aero city, to the city that, I mean, we saw a lot of pictures, a lot of drawings by Lazar Khidekel of the cities that are soaring right above the space, some even going as far as being, you know, in cosmos, possibly, you know, his interpretation of having a city above the planet, above the surface of the planet, orbiting space. And the idea was that the Aero city will have to minimize the sort of the tactile contact between the urban structure and between the urban structure. So the urban structure and the natural environment will only be connected through pillars, like, for example, shown here. And his ideas of Aero city show that the city will have to be positioned on the pillars or will be completely elevated, will be floating right above the environment. But the design of the city would not just protect environment from the human impact, from the also expansion of urbanism, but it would also protect people from adverse natural effects. So there could be, you know, true equilibrium. So abstract, linear, graphic, and the pictorial suprematic utopias developed by Lazar present language for conceiving those future urban developments that can correspond to the present human needs and sensibilities with obvious, you know, eye to the future. So the theory and practice of supremacy that was tragically interrupted, I mean, one could even say, you know, almost kind of strangled in its cradle by the historical calamities of the 20th century, by Stalinism, the war, and later neglect of the Soviet regime. They can inspire few generations, and they are inspiring a lot of artists and architects to look at those ideas in practical terms, to apply them for the new modern urban environment, design, development of infrastructure. Far-sighted visions of Lazar Khidekel could become sort of the instruments of the new visual and artistic representation and for technological solutions that could be used by the future generations. And this is the project of the bridge city that we are presenting. So the bridge city, it's fairly simple structure because it's basically like a concrete bridge or a viaduct. So the technology is here. It's just made out of concrete, reinforced concrete structure, elevated above the natural environment, could be elevated above the land, could be elevated above water, above marshes. And it can provide continuous urban living structure, but at the same time, it's a multi-purpose structure. So it can obviously provide and act as a very efficient transportation artery. So you could have a subway lines, you could have obviously highway, trains, possibly even, you know, helicopter landing pads here. I will show you more up-close pictures. So you see the structure could be fully modular, multi-level. So for example, first level could be used for the transportation, second level could be used for urban dwelling space, for residential, for commercial, upper levels obviously could be used as a park space, as an area of recreation, enjoyment. This is up close. I mean, the structure could be, you know, fully enclosed with trees, vegetation. this is, to show the scale. I mean, obviously it's expandable. You notice that we have extensive solar panels could be used. I mean, all kinds of renewable sources of energy could be used also because the structure itself is situated on the river or at the mouth of the ocean. It could be, there's a possibility of using tidal turbines. It's a very efficient method of producing energy because the tides release enormous amounts of energy. And if just, some fraction of percent of it could be tapped, I mean, you could have literally megawatts of energy really readily available to power the structure, even in neighboring areas. And this is a view that we proposed for the 96th Street that could span across close to Randall's Island, could even span into Queens. And now comes a very important issue that Lazar raised, and it became obviously very apparent after we were hit by the 2 hurricanes in the last 2 years. That structure, since it's elevated above the landscape, it can fully protect from flooding, from hurricanes, from tsunami. I mean, that's very obvious. And the structure itself will incorporate various safety and protective mechanisms, such as floodgates demonstrated here. So you see, during the normal operation, I mean, it's just open breach, completely open for navigation, and during the time of emergency, the system itself can automatically lower floodgates, so it can protect the neighboring urban environments behind it, and the urban structures on top of the structure itself can also become almost like an urban arc, because during the emergency, people in the communities that are living in the nearby low areas can quickly be evacuated to the structure and could be fully protected by the tsunami or by the hurricane and by various other, adverse nature effects. And so I just want to conclude with the statement that ideas of Russian suprematism and avant-garde live on. They inspire new creative ideas that could be used for solving various needs of a new urban cities, and they can also be used to protect us from adverse natural effects and adverse weather, as demonstrated by the 2 hurricanes that we faced. Thank you.